Okay.
But just so
Okay, we'll come to order the Public Protection Judiciary Committee. Roll call. Janet?
Bob Fiedler,
Present.
Paul Adams,
Present.
Mark Carlson. Present. Kathy Leaf,
Present.
Tim Ramberg,
Present.
And could I get a motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, they're approved. Okay, normally we'd go to public comment at this time, but I just want to add two informational items very quickly. At our last board meeting, we had a discussion with our district attorney about the lack of salaries for and numbers of assistant district attorneys, and we'll take that up at our December agenda. I've been speaking with the district attorney about that, and we're working on a proposed resolution that we may consider then. So it's not on our agenda now, but we're not ignoring that issue. The other issue I'd like to very quickly bring up is we are also the county's emergency management committee, and we have not really functioned in that role or talked too much about it or had presentations on that. But it's a very important function potentially. Our chairman, Bob Long, who's sitting in the audience, is also mentioned in our bylaws as being the key person on emergencies in the county. But we are the emergency management committee according to our bylaws and state law. So again, for December, I was going to recommend that we have our emergency management staff come in and brief us thoroughly on our role in that. And potentially that might lead to an exercise of some kind in the spring. I would also just add very quickly that, I'll stop at that point. Supervisor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to this critical function, as we look out, there are issues and the potentiality for any number of emergencies here in St. Croix County, particularly with I-94 running straight through us, hazardous materials, or any other issues. So possibly we could look at a tabletop exercise where we come up with a scenario that maybe involves I-94 or something adjacent to it, and allow our emergency management folks to sort of walk us through how we would manage something like that. So I'll put that out there on the table.
Thank you. I think it's a great idea. I'm also going to distribute to folks something I gave to Chairman Long, and as a result of his request that those of us who attended the WCA meeting, I just gave him some of the highlights of what we saw. I'm only sharing it with you because the last item that I put on it deals with emergency management. And you don't have to read it now for sure, but stick it in your file, take a look at the notes I took at that session of the WCA, and that might just be suggestive to us of some questions we might have in the future. Now we'll have public comment. Is there any public comment today? I haven't gotten any list from anybody, so public comment? Any public comment? Okay, we'll move to our business items. Our administrator on our financial report.
Thank you, Chair. The financial report is in the packet. This is representing through the end of September. So we're 3/4 of the way through the year. Basically what I can tell you is that everything is pretty much on target, on track for where we would expect to be at this point through the year. All of the departments are doing a good job of maintaining within their budgets, and revenues are falling within projections of where we would expect them to be at this point in time. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on the budget, but there aren't any anomalies or issues to point out for you.
That's always a great report. Are there any questions for the administrator? Seeing none, we'll move to item 2, and that's also the administrator.
So the idea came up a while ago, but I think that a lot of the discussion that we had during the budget process about public safety and positions is one that warrants some additional discussion. And so today is a discussion item on a way that we can provide additional staffing, additional support to the public safety departments of the county. So basically, the state of Wisconsin limits our levy And remember, the tax levy is only a third of our total budget, but it does fund most of public safety, because public safety isn't a revenue generator in other ways. So in order to increase anything within public safety, it's generally the tax levy. So the tax levy by the state of Wisconsin can only be increased by net new construction, which is a very small percentage, which, doesn't even keep up with the inflation rate. So if we wanted to seriously consider increasing public safety anywhere near the rate of growth that the county has been experiencing over the last couple decades, then it's going to take something in excess of that net new construction number. So the state of Wisconsin has provided us with the vehicle to do that. It has to be approved by the voters, so this is something the voters will have to want. But this is the idea that I'm presenting to you. So I sat down with the different department heads, and we talked through what the needs would be for the different departments. So we have each of the different departments and looked at what staffing needs would be. So all the different departments came up with a total of 45 different positions that they would like to have. If we had a unlimited checkbook, what would they want for their department in order to meet our growth needs? So they came up with this list. I did highlight some, and I'm not saying no to the other ones. That's really your decision to say yes and no. But I came up with a list of recommendations, really to bring it probably down more into a palatable dollar amount. So the total was 45 positions, and it came out to about $5.6 million. So I narrowed that down to 23 positions, just under $3.5 million, which is probably a better range for us to be at if we're going to go to the voters and ask for an increase in the tax levy in order to afford this expansion. So really what I want to do is to talk through the concept of if a referendum is something that you want to do, and then talk about what we should include in that. Timing-wise, what the next steps would be is, we'll talk about it today. Next month, we would bring back a formal resolution that would initiate the process. So we'll give you a month to think about it. That resolution would go to the county board then the following month, and once approved by the county board, it would end up on the April ballot. So we would have then a few months to continue to work through the education process for the public about what the request is, what it all entails. Is this something that you as a voter then would be interested in supporting? So we have to make sure that we're not lobbying for the referendum. We're not allowed to lobby. We can't put out vote yes campaign posters or anything like that, but we can educate. We can say this is what a yes vote means. It means we add these, and a no vote means we won't be adding these. And this is where the tax rate would be under those two different scenarios. And we would provide that educational support material. We'd make Adam do most of that work. So first of all, I guess that's the overarching concept. So get your impressions about whether pursuing a referendum to increase public safety department staffing is something you're interested in, or is that just a bad idea and we can stop now?
Do we need a motion to discuss?
No, at a committee, you don't have to motion first.
So a couple questions. The 3.3 million is recommended. I see in the yes or no question that you started, it said an increase of 3.5 ongoing. Can you explain that? And then I have another question for you.
I just used a round number.
So what I looked at that though, and I'm thinking, could we add another, go back up, with the HHS side? I mean, I agree with all of this. What I'm trying to do is move a little upstream with some of the recovery and treatment pieces. So if we're already going to the voters with a number, I would like to make sure we have some more HHS amounts in there. If we're going to do it, we might as well do it correctly.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's just a starting point. What Supervisor Leaf was referring to, this is what the referendum question would look like. So we would plug in the dollar amounts. Those are just, mathematical calculations. I plugged in 3.5 million as just a round number of where I think a good place to be. That puts us at a 7.86% increase. If we did the 5.6, that put us over 11%. And I think once you get into a double-digit percentage, the perception of that would just be a no. So I don't think that the list with 45 positions on it is doable. I think it has to be something less than that, whether it's 3.5 million, whether it's 3 million, whether it's 4 million. That's really for you guys to decide. But this is what the referendum question would look like. You can see that there's 2 words that are in red. Everything else on that question is dictated by the state. So the first 2 support pages in the packet were the state requirements. So that is exactly how the question will read, minus the 2 red lettering. That's where you explain what it is that you want. You have a few words to do that. So I just put public safety now as a placeholder, but just know that when we write the question, it's already written. The state has written it for us.
Supervisor Adams.
Chair, I think it's extremely important that we tackle this now, that we bring it before the voters so that the people have a say, so that if a referendum does not pass, then the results are on us as voters. But with our growth that you've articulated and that we've seen just driving around Hudson and St. Croix County, now is the time to get this done. It's not going to get any less easier to do, and I support a referendum where the people have a say in it and they have a say in what happens if it does not pass. And then my next question is, when you say we can't lobby, do you mean us as a county board, as a committee, as individual citizens? How does that piece work, please?
Yeah, I'm talking mostly about staff. So just know that if you come to staff and say, well, we really got to sell this, okay, so the staff will not be selling it. The staff will educate, but we will not sell. So I just want to be very clear about what our position is and required by the state. You as a citizen, as an elected official, you can promote it all you want. I will say too, not that we're taking their idea, because I had the idea before they did it in Washington County. I just want to be clear. So Washington County, Wisconsin, the other side of the state, fairly comparable, they have an almost identical referendum question on their ballot next Tuesday. So we're going to find out their vote results. But that'll be a great template for how they did it, how they presented it, and what their result was. So they have about a $3.5 million referendum question, all related to public safety, adding deputies and other support positions.
Is there any indication on what other referendums might be coming up at the same time if we do this next year? Because you start adding up a lot of money with referendums and something's going to fall off the table.
Yeah, that question has come up. The Hudson School District has talked about a referendum. Really, though, when I'm running the county, I can't worry about what other taxing jurisdictions are going to do. Whether they do or don't have a referendum, that is completely out of my control. We have our needs, we have our time limitations of when we are able to do this and have to do this. So we should do what we're going to do. I think that other referendum questions could have an impact on the voters, but it's out of our control.
I had just one general question dealing with the process of how we would want to go forward. Obviously, the referendum is what you've concluded is the best way to go forward, all things considered. But could you also address, if we didn't do a referendum and we tried to do a number of the things, additions to the staffing that have been recommended, what are those options, even if they're bad ones?
Yeah, there's 2 other scenarios then. Timing-wise on this referendum, it works really well with our budget process too. So if you remember that calendar, March we're going to be setting budget priorities, and then May is when we start distributing information to department heads and stuff. But if we have this answer in April, that will potentially answer a lot of budgetary questions. So if I know public safety's taken care of through the referendum, then the rest of the budget process, I can focus on the other parts of the county. So, but that's the issue. So if the referendum is a no, or you decide you don't want to do the referendum, next year when I put the budget together, we're looking at 5 to 6 new positions. That's what we can afford if we prioritize positions. So we have a list of 45 requested just from the public safety departments. I haven't asked the other departments yet what their needs are when we tell them the county board has created new positions as their number one priority. All right, now there'll be 5 to 6 of them in the county. So you can see why this is, needed rather than through the normal budget process. Now, the other option then is cutting somewhere else in the budget. So if you can make other cuts in the budget to free up space here in public safety, then we can do that. But you have to remember, too, is how public safety is funded compared to a lot of other departments. So if you go, okay, well, we're going to cut something in highway, or we're going to cut something in HHS, well, those two areas are 1/3 funded by tax levy. So if you wanted to free $1 million of tax levy, you have to cut $3 million of expenses. So it is not a simple exercise to go that route. But those are basically the 3 options: referendum, cut somewhere else, or live with our annual net new construction, which would be 5 to 6 new positions next year.
And there's no option to dip further reasonably into our unassigned balance fund.
I'm going to strongly recommend against any time that you want to use ongoing expenses with one-time money. So if you start taking money out of your savings account to pay for your utility bill and your rent and stuff like that, eventually your savings account is gone, but those bills are still there. So you have to have an income stream that matches operating expenses.
I would just note in that thing I handed out to the supervisors a moment ago from our Wisconsin Counties Association program, the first paragraph or 2 dealt with fiscal issues, and that was one of their strong recommendations, what Ken just made. Don't spend one-time money on multi-year projects. Is there any other comment anybody would like to, or any questions for Ken, or any other additions Ken would like to make? Supervisor Carlson.
Go over the timeline again, when this would come up.
Yep. So we'll discuss it today. Really, today you're going to say whether you want the idea to move forward or not. So that's what I'm asking for today. And we'll talk about the positions a little bit too, if you do want to move forward. And then next month we will have a resolution in front of this committee that will actually ask for the referendum vote. So we'll actually approve this wording right here. Yes, this is the information that we want on a ballot. County Board will adopt it the following month, and then it'll end up on the April ballot.
There's no more discussion on that item. We'll turn to our child.
So,
Oh,
the
I'm
other,
sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
so I would like a motion of whether this is something that you want to move forward with, and then just a little bit of input would be helpful too on the position. So I have 45 positions on here. I've recommended 23 of them. But I don't think that that should be the end of the discussion on these positions. I mean, I've picked what I thought was probably needed before I sat down with all the department heads. That's basically where my picks were at. But they made some really good arguments, and I think you guys should hear a little bit of that. If you could give us about 10 minutes to go through the positions.
Supervisor.
I would move to support the referendum.
It's been moved and seconded to support that. Now, just to clarify, I think what the administrator recommended was that we would move on this in December. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is just saying that you're going to support this process. So then I will invest staff time to actually complete the resolution, start preparing all of the background information. So it's helpful to know that the elected officials support an idea, even though you're just voting yes that we like the idea.
The concept of doing a referendum
Correct.
to support a generic number
Yep.
of positions you'll come back to us with later.
Yep.
Okay, is there any further discussion we need on that?
Do you need a number though? Do you want us to amend to a number of positions, or do you want to just have us go through that and then you take our input and that's fine? I mean, I don't know how specific you want this now.
Yeah, I think the motion can be the way you have it now, that we're going to support the process. I do want to take a couple minutes to go through the list of positions so that we can get a feel for what you want, and I will incorporate that into the first draft of the resolution, which is always amendable then by the committee and the county board in the future meetings.
Although it may be cart before the horse, but since there appears to be no more discussion on the general idea of moving forward the referendum, I'll just call for a voice vote on that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Ken, would you like to
Okay.
give further explanation?
Yeah, so I did want to spend just a couple of minutes to go through these positions. I will give you a real quick overview of what I remember about each of the positions, and the department heads then can chime in if you have more specific questions on it. So with the Sheriff's Department, we're looking at 8 patrol deputies. So 4 patrol deputies make up a shift. So 4 patrol deputies mean you're adding 1 person per shift to cover 24/7. So this would be 2. Investigators, what they're looking at is 2 investigators, and then 1 would be a computer forensic supervisor, which is really an investigator. At the end of the day, that's how we would probably classify it within the payroll system. A civilian evidence custodian, so as evidence becomes more complex and more of it, adding a civilian position to manage that. 4 correction deputies. So again, 4 equals 1 person per shift. So you're adding basically 1 person per shift within the jail, and then 1 dispatcher position. So within the sheriff, those are the positions. So they do have some capital costs involved with those also. So road deputies have take-home squad vehicles. They're on a 3-year rotation. So there's a cost involved with that. Same with investigators. There's a vehicle cost. When you add positions, you're adding capital also. And then my recommendation is to move the 27 current patrol vehicles from the KIP into the operating budget. So I think that's been a recurring question. I know it didn't really come up this year so much, but year after year since I've been here, that's been a question of why do we have something that only lasts for 3 years in the KIP? Generally, the KIP is for things that last 5 years or more. So this would correct that. In the district attorneys, stop me, I guess, if you guys have questions. Yeah.
So the $1 million for the deputies, that includes like total outfitting of weaponry and, like there's a lot that goes into the each person that gets assigned, we hire. There's more than just the salary. So I'm assuming that number includes that?
This is mostly looking at the annual compensation increase. So this is the wages, this is the benefits, this is a uniform allowance and holidays. It doesn't include a firearm or maybe a couple of initial startup costs, but
Yeah, there's a lot of gear in the squads too that's not included in that.
yeah. So as we refine this over the next month, we will probably refine these numbers a little bit, but this gives you a really close starting point to where we're looking.
Just a point of interest, on the general transportation aids formula that the state has, there is 40% of some of the sheriff's costs that are part of that, and then we get back in the transportation aids formula about 19.5% of that, just as a point of interest. And it's a measure, the GTA formula is a measure of the activity on the county highway system, and the sheriff's activity, the county sheriff's activity is part of that measure. So there is, we would have to dig into it, of course, with the finance department and whatnot, and that's a highway department revenue that would assist in those costs as per the formula. Just a point.
Thank you, Supervisor Ramberg. You're probably the only person in this room that knew that. District Attorney. So within the District Attorney's Office, 1.5 diversion program case management specialist. They have 2.5 currently. 1 legal assistant, which has been on their list for the last couple of years, and then 1 investigator. So this is a unique position. We found a couple of examples like over in Marathon County. It's an investigator, so it is a sworn law enforcement officer that works just for the district attorney's office to investigate, follow up on investigations, really, within the district attorney's office.
So, yeah, this is by statute, an investigator position. It's 978.047. The district attorney of any county may appoint such investigators as are authorized by the county board. We're somewhat of a large county to not have an investigator. There's counties with as few as 2 prosecutors that have investigators. Basically, Sheriff's Department, they have their own investigators, but we have a lot of really small police agencies, Baldwin, Glenwood City, they do not have any investigators whatsoever. They have patrol officers who respond to a call, write an initial report. They're not used to writing search warrants, document subpoenas. They don't, they have their own patrol duties and they don't have a bunch of free time to also do their own investigations. State Patrol doesn't do investigations, so when we need follow-up on State Patrol cases, we're always basically, currently, we're constantly bringing in Sheriff's Department investigators onto cases that are not theirs for sometimes just really quick follow-up, because my prosecutors can never be witnesses, so we can't gather any facts. So if there's an overnight strangulation case and the officer in whatever jurisdiction forgot to ask if the victim's breathing was impeded, we got to bring up somebody from the Sheriff's Department to call the victim to just ask that one question, where if we had an investigator, that's something they would do. They'd be in the office there ready to do it. Oftentimes we get calls from civilian citizens and they want to report information to us, and we can't take that report because we can't gather facts, because if they then say something different, we're a witness to what they told us originally. So we need a law enforcement officer to take those calls. One problem that we have somewhat routinely is people want to bring information to us, we refer them to law enforcement, and then they never call again. They tried once and they don't do it again. Other things that these positions do in other counties is at preliminary hearings there needs to be testimony, and we're bringing in generally officers who are often on overtime from the Sheriff's Department or other jurisdictions, whereas this, the investigator in counties that have them do a lot of that kind of stuff, so you're not paying people overtime to come in during the business day if they work overnight shifts or whatever. It could also be useful in cases where agencies have conflicts, if they have something within their own department that needs investigating, or somebody they work with regularly. The district attorney investigator would be more neutral. And in my experience, or what I've heard, is the way it works is they're kind of under the umbrella of the Sheriff's Department in that they're certified, they get firearms squad cars through them, and they're kind of under that umbrella, but then they report to the district attorney.
Yeah, so like I said, there's some unique positions that are requested on here. That was one of them. Yes.
We've already discussed as the board, and we want to bring it up next month, but we're short attorneys already, and I think they're grossly underpaid, which is why we're short attorneys. I believe a position like you're talking about will help with the shortage of the shortage that we have right now too. So I would support putting an investigator like he's requesting.
I appreciate the feedback. Under Justice Support Services, so we have 2 pretrial case managers. These are existing employees that we have. They're grant funded through ARPA through the end of '23. So we do have to find a way to continue those. So Phil is asking for those plus an additional pretrial case manager. So I think these are important positions that we identify how we're going to fund those moving forward, because we're not going to reduce the number of pretrial case managers we have. We have to find a different funding. If it's not funded through here, we're probably looking at those 5 to 6 positions we can afford is where we'd end up having to fund those from. And then the other position was an administrative assistant. So as this department is starting to grow, they don't have any administrative support at all yet. So it'd be the time to look at adding some support for that department.
If I could just jump in for a second, this may not come soon enough to be of help to this process or next year, even during the fiscal year, but just last night, CVS and Walgreens agreed to a major settlement in the opioid issues, $10 billion. And that might be just the beginning from some of the pharmaceutical enterprises. Those are two that settled it for $10 billion. Earlier in the year, we had discussed and we had funded with other opioid settlements from the distributors a position in the Health and Human Services area, at the Sheriff's Department, effectively, for the next almost 20 years. So that might be a possibility for funding in the future, but that's, lots of loops before we get money on that, but I just throw that out.
Yes, I'm always trying to match a revenue stream with our expenses, so. Clerk of Courts, so 2 additional deputy clerks, 1 manager of information technology, which would probably be a deputy clerk plus, and then an interpreter scheduler, which is basically would be another deputy clerk position, but their primary duties would be scheduling the interpreters. I think you were saying you worked with 7 different languages last week. Yeah. So within the judicial department then, so the family court commissioner, so currently our family court commissioner is a part-time basis. So increasing that to full-time, adding the benefits then, the incremental cost would be $87,000. Adding a law clerk. So a law clerk is an attorney that then assists the judges with writing of their opinions and documents. So it's an attorney on staff to assist them with their legal work. And then 1 guardian ad litem. We're contracted currently at $80,000. This is basically doubling that contracted amount that we have. So it's not a staff position per se, it's a contracted services that we provide. Within the medical examiner, so currently the medical examiner's office is, there's a half-time position that's a county employee. The rest of them are contracted employees that are basically paid on a piecemeal basis. So they get paid per call, per hour of service, per report that they write. This would be changing that model. It'd be shifting that model to an in-house county employee type of medical examiner's office. So the request was for 1 chief of investigations and 1 investigator that is full-time county employed rather than a contracted staff. So it's starting to shift that model, and that model would probably continue to shift then over the next few years.
I have a question.
Yep.
With the new scanner, I mean, I think what you're envisioning for this new model probably has to do with that whole regional sort of forensics center idea.
It only takes us about 10 minutes to scan, so that's not where it's at. It is our increase in our deaths. So last week we were 20 cases behind last year. This week we're 5 cases ahead. So our death rate just continues to increase, and we need more caseworkers for scene visits. And as we have more elderly people dying at home unwitnessed, that by statute means we have to go investigate. And each one of those investigations take a lot of time, and at the end of the day, it is the county that signs the death certificate. So, those investigations are just continuing to increase, and it's having a full-time investigator. This is my wish list, not the list, get that, but having a department that has both contract employees and full-time employees actually is a way to move forward and have our days covered better. I personally do over half of the cases. And I'm not going to be around forever. So we need to start looking at succession plans.
So we have the cost of adding those people. What's that cost compared to what we're doing now, the contract?
So right now, our investigators get paid $3.50 an hour to be on call. And then, but as, you know, we have more and more calls, like the administrator said, it's all piecework. So I think in the long run, you will save money in the future by at least having a investigator in there to offset and do more shift work. But finding death investigators on a part-time basis is very difficult right now.
It's cost and level of service. So this model does cost more money, but this provides more service hours of delivery. So it's just like every decision, you know, you can spend more and get higher level of service. And that's what the request is in front of you. In the child support division, it's a one child support coordinator. This is sort of a in-between between the administrator and the child support specialist that they have. It's 66% reimbursable, so there's only a very small dollar amount figure on there. Within Corporation Counsel, so this is one that would be at the top of my list. I would recommend this even if the referendum isn't approved. It's an assistant corporation counsel to take over the CHIPS cases from the district attorney's office. So it would take that caseload out of the district attorney's office and put it into corporation counsel's hands. There's some benefits, there's some pluses and minuses to doing that. But one of the big pluses is it takes the caseload from the DA's office. So we've talked about, you know, their caseload and their workload and their staffing. This would be one way to help ease that, since they're state employees and we don't have a lot of other options of how to do that.
And by statute, the CHIPS caseload can either be in the DA's office or corporation counsel, and it's up to the county board.
We do pay our attorneys.
And you would support this change?
Yes.
Yeah. We do pay our attorneys more than the DA's office does.
This is really the only thing that, as the county board,
Yeah.
you to alleviate the load of the DA's office attorneys.
Yeah.
It's about all that the county has control over.
And then in Health and Human Services, so these are their ARPA-funded positions, plus 2 additional co-responders. So the co-responders, I think, have a direct and immediate impact on law enforcement, because they'll respond in place or in conjunction with law enforcement and be able to take over a scene and handle it differently than the way law enforcement does. But then their law enforcement is freed from that scene to go to other calls. That's where I think it has a direct immediate impact. Some of the other positions, we just started these in 2022, these ARPA-funded positions. They may very well be having an impact also, maybe a little bit less direct impact. And we will have to find additional funding when these positions expire at the end of 2024 for their ARPA funding. But that would give us a little bit more time to delve into how they're helping, which ones are the most beneficial. But anyways, so that's the list of 45 positions. So I did want to, you know, get your feedback. If there's anything on that list that, you know, I'd highlighted that you said, so I don't think that's really necessary, or if there's something that I didn't highlight that you said, please add that to the list, so I can bring that back in the form of the resolution next month.
You're balancing a lot of things in the budget that are very difficult to juggle. But one of the things we did with the latest iteration of ARPA funds, we put it into the KIP budget so they could be available to offset any deficits in the building. We're getting costs coming in on that in November and in late February. And it's conceivable that we will be under cost. It's conceivable, not likely maybe, but conceivable. In which case, potentially some of those ARPA funds that we put into the KIP could be freed up to further fund positions that were previously ARPA funded. Is that a possibility?
So the ARPA funds have to be used by the end of 2024. So we funded these ARPA positions for 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. So even though we may have additional funds that would be available to use, it doesn't extend the term. We still have to spend the money by the end of '24. So it doesn't help us to do that. One of Supervisor Rotino's ideas that he had brought up during the budget meetings was, well, he wanted a more immediate impact. And I said, well, you should come to the meeting on Thursday because I'm going to tell you exactly how we can get there. And that's where those ARPA dollars come in, though. So if we put this packet together and the voters approve this in April, I know in 2024, I'm going to have the funds to cover those positions. But we have the rest of '23. We have 8 months of 2023 left. But if I know those have funding in '24, we can take the ARPA dollars and fund those immediately in 2023. We can roll some of those up immediately and sort of stagger the implementation of some of these positions then. And that's where the ARPA dollars could be used for. And it would make Supervisor Rotino happy, which, you know.
He's with us today and he's smiling. Are there any other comments the minister would like to make or questions? Supervisor Carlton.
This question has to do with the request for the sheriff department positions, and it's for the sheriff. Would you change what he recommends in the yellow? Or
these numbers were what we thought we could implement that would get us through for years to come. That was that component of those investigators. You know, we were looking at, because we knew we weren't going to add, if we didn't add any next year off the budget as it was, it wasn't going to get any better in 5 years or 10 years. So we're kind of looking down the road. These I could use right now. In 10 years, I guess we'll see what the population does and the crime rate does. But now this gets us in a much better position than we are at.
would you, part of my question is, you got 2 investigators. Would you rather have 1 investigator and an evidence custodian, or do you like the way the administrator mixed it, the mix?
I like the way it's been mixed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from anybody? I would just mention that the sheriff just mentioned criminal trends, crime trends. At the CJCC, there's a criminal subcommittee that Judge Waterman chairs, and Mr. Ghali staffs that committee. And when they met either in, I think it was in September, they had a broad discussion about trends and statistics in the county. And the upshot of it all is that Mr. Ghali is now in the midst of preparing a larger report, maybe the first of its kind in St. Croix County, that will show us from a variety of different inputs from HHS, from the sheriff, from the DA, from other entities, exactly what's happening in the county with regard to crime. And that perhaps may focus some of those needs that we've discussed. And I think perhaps you'll have a summary of something in January and maybe perfect it as we give him further input next year. So with that, one more comment from the administrator?
Yep, so the highlighted plus the addition of the investigator within the district attorneys is what I heard.
I mean, I'd still like HHS, but I understand what you're saying about ARPA and.
Microphone.
Okay, I'll say it again. I still was looking at HHS in terms of adding another one, but I mean, I don't think, Bob's not here today to answer to that, and some of them are ARPA things that we're just trying to figure out, but I think the co-responders, that's a good one. Even if we added one more new one, I think we're already seeing the impact of that.
Very good. I will take this forward then. You will see a cleaned up version next month then in the form of a resolution. I thank you for your input.
Thank you. That's a major item we just discussed, and which we will be discussing in December. Thanks, Mr. Administrator. We'll now turn to our next item on the agenda. I'll be calling on Lisa Plunkett, our Child Support Administrator, to just briefly describe resolution that I think will be an easy one for us to adopt. It relates to asking the state for more money, but I'll turn to Ms. Plunkett to further describe it.
Thank you. I'm asking that you support a resolution for increase budget item for child support program. The child support program, for every dollar that the state invests in the child support program, receives roughly $2 in a federal match. We are cost effective, collecting an average of $6.43 in support for every dollar invested in the program. So we're seeking the increase of $5 million GPR for the fiscal year 2023 through 2025. This will generate approximately $9.7 million in additional funding each year for the child support program.
Thank you, Lisa. Would somebody like to make a motion to put this resolution on the table? Supervisor Lee?
I move to approve the resolution in support of child support services, increased funding.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Supervisor Adams, any further discussion? Seeing none, I think we can take a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's adopted. And I'll return to another nice item for Ms. Plunkett to raise.
Thank you. We have been awarded a domestic violence grant through the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin received $1.5 million for 5 years to fund a program to be developed in the child support program for domestic violence coordinator. And also along with that, the Kudure tribe in Hayward has also received a $1.5 million grant, so we'll be working closely together with them. The reason we applied for this grant is it would be an expert, informed, trained person within our program to become part of the solution and to not propagate the problem. We want to be able to encourage and empower parents more effectively so they can pay it forwards by encouraging and empowering the next person, and most importantly, so our children can grow up in a violence-free environment. I'm looking forward to, I have a meeting actually today, and to decide how we're going to format that within Wisconsin, but it's a very good award. I don't know the funding amounts associated with that at this point for each county. Brown County and Kenosha County are also counties that were awarded the grant. So I'm looking forward to working with the judicial, Dr. Phil Gawley and CJCC and Turning Point and all those, coordinating also with Pepin County, Buffalo County, and Pierce County.
Supervisor Rambert, did you have a comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say congratulations.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know whose microphone was on. Supervisor Leaf, because I think we all would.
Yeah, congratulations.
That comes from the whole committee as well, and way to go. Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll move to the next item. We'll turn to our medical examiner, Patty Schachter.
Good morning. We have our scanner up and running. Wanted to let you know that it's been going for about 2 weeks now. In that time, we had 7 cases that qualified for a full autopsy. That would have been about $11,400 in potential cost. We ruled out trauma on 6 of those, and we're only going to get a forensic report on 2, which in 2 weeks was a savings of $6,900 to the county. So the system is working and doing what it needs to do. We're also getting some really good feedback from families of decedents. And, the whole conversation of ruling out trauma when we're dealing with unexpected death is, that's what families are worried about. Were they hurt? Did they have anything broken? Was there projectiles? And we can do that pretty quickly now. And like I said, it takes us about 10 minutes to do the scan. We do this here, it includes, we do QA checks once a week and calibration every day to make sure our system is working well. And we have one person right now trained fully on the scan. Next week we flip. She's going to QA and calibration, and I'll go to scanning, so we'll have 2. trained, and then we'll work on the rest of the staff. We're taking it real slow. The forensic PAC system, which is where we send to the forensic radiologists in New Mexico, that I only have one person with their fingers on the keyboard on that, because I think too many fingers might mess that up. So Tina is really doing a good job with that. We had our first out-of-county case, so that will be a revenue generator for us, and we've had 7 counties that want to participate in our program. So as far as generating revenue, that is going to be a good thing, but we're taking it slow. One of our biggest problems, actually, is our cooler space. Our cooler has been full now for the last 2.5 weeks. We're constantly going in and out. The new coolers will be coming sometime in January, and we will have 2 single system coolers with separate condensers. They each will hold 12 decedents, but we are looking at processing 1 cooler for homicide holds, a 2nd cooler for our folks that are coming in and out, and then our 3rd cooler will be for decomps. Unfortunately, in St. Croix County, we have a lot of folks who are deceased for days, sometimes weeks, before they're found, and we have to find a place for them. So our smaller cooler will be then earmarked for decomps, and that's just where we are as society right now. We're seeing a huge increase on alcohol-related deaths, natural. So that would be cirrhosis, alcohol-related cirrhosis, either long-term or short-term. Our youngest person now is 23 years old who died from cirrhosis. We're also finding that our chronic alcoholic population is growing. They're working independently, living independently. However, when they're found deceased, what we find is homes that have hundreds and hundreds of empty bottles of alcohol. And when I talk to my colleagues in other counties, they're seeing it. So we have our illegal drug problem, and we also have our legal thing. These deaths are all rated as natural. Because alcohol is a legal substance. So we're seeing the alcohol content of upwards of 0.4. So I'm not sure how this is going to be dealt with, but it impacts law enforcement, it impacts drug court, it impacts the DA's office, it impacts everybody in that, and it is it's a real issue, and it's coming to head, and it seems like it's coming to head everywhere.
Could I jump in for just 1 second?
Yep.
Okay. As I understand it from chatting with the DA and the judges, the sheriff and others, although we talk about the drug problem all the time, and it's big, the alcohol problem overwhelms the drug problem. Everybody concurs with that statement. Mm-hmm. This committee, over the past 3 years, has annually done a program of some sort that we've responded in many ways to what the medical examiner has brought to our attention. One was on the criminal issues related to drugs. One was on elder abuse. One was on suicide prevention. So the question I would just raise to our committee, just as a sense of the committee type of thing that we can talk with key people in HHS and sheriff and the medical examiner for the future, would we want to highlight this issue through some sort of vigorous public relations campaign and program beyond what we normally do as a goal for next year for this committee, perhaps in conjunction with HHS? So I would just ask if if people would like to pursue that in some way, we could go forward. If there's no interest, I see kind of thumbs going up in the air. So we'll kind of talk about that. Everybody's invited to participate and share their ideas, because it's a committee project, and I'll work with the HHS chair and Patty, and we'll see where that takes us. It may be to fall of next year before we execute something, but we'll start the process shortly. Thank you. That's all I had on that.
Thank you for that. We also, with UW Extension, we're teaching a pre-planning class. One of the problems that we're having is there's so many folks that don't have anything down. They don't have anything written down, which then impacts the work that we do. So UW Extension started this pre-planning class. I took the facilitator portion of it. I'm now facilitating a class at the Somerset Library. We have 6 people that are taking it. It's a very good class, and I think that we're going to be able to get out there to really let people know how this is good for everybody, and it actually helps us process deaths faster if we have that, if people have that information for themselves. On that same topic, November 17th, mark your calendars, 10 o'clock is when we're going to be burying our first group of unclaimed descendants. They will be laid to rest at the county cemetery out by the health center on North 4th Street. I'm working with one of the local funeral homes to get this whole process started, and we'll keep you all posted, but we have included a lot of our civic groups, Lions, Kiwanis. They're the ones that are really helping facilitate this. Local school district, we included the arts and metals department. They made crosses all for the decedents. So we've really been able to talk about grieving and what it means and how to treat bodies respectfully. So that'll be happening on the 17th. And last thing, just so you know, when we're talking about costs at the medical examiner's office, I just made an order for 48 body bags. We go through a lot of body bags, and that is a cost of $1,500. Body bags are very expensive, and we go through a lot of them. So, any questions? Yes?
We appreciate this report, and awesome that your operations are not only helping the families, which is hugely important, that level of service, but also helping to generate income. As you look out in the out years, 10, 15 years, what are you seeing in terms of possibly a new building? Are you looking at a new facility? I don't know. I mean, I walked through.
That was the deer in the headlights look. I'm hoping to be retired by then. In that, I think that the building that we have, by using the DD building the way we have in refurbishing it, probably was the smartest decision for us. I don't think that there is going to be a need for a new building. There may be needs to enhance what we're doing, but with the CAT scan machine, that is going to be helpful moving forward. I see a day that we will have a contract forensic pathologist coming to St. Croix County, so we don't have to move bodies at all. That would be the smartest thing, and we are all set up for that. We had water plumbed into the new area, so it would just be the investment of buying a station, and I don't think we would need more than one in the 10 years out. But if we did that, and planned with our scanner and an autopsy machine, just in reference, Northern Wisconsin doesn't have any access in state from, it's almost La Crosse County all the way across. And with the 7 counties that we have, Ramsey County does about 3,400 autopsies a year. They charge $1,400 per autopsy. So we could be looking at, if we are visionary, that this could be a really good generator of revenue for the county and really move us as leaders in the area. So I think we're set up to have one, and we could handle it quite well.
Seeing no other questions for the medical examiner, we'll turn to Phil Gawley and report on the MAT grant.
Thank you. Back in August, our department, it wasn't just our department, it was the county. It's a collaborative project between Justice Services, the Sheriff's Department, specifically the jail, and Behavioral Health specifically, or Health and Human Services, specifically Behavioral Health, to support medication-assisted treatment. So MAT is the acronym, something that is used a lot in the field. There are different forms of medicated-assisted treatment, different medications that help folks who are struggling with alcohol and or opioid abuse. So I'm going to have Kathy talk a little bit about that, but the grant runs through July 31st of next year, with the hope that we can then maybe extend that grant for another year through the Department of Justice. It's $150,000. Kathy, what do you think?
Yeah, so this grant is through the Department of Justice, and I think it's a pretty unique grant because it's what law enforcement has known and has had conversations with people my entire career. And people that come to us are arrested are often having conversations with our arresting officers, with our investigators, with our jail staff, with our jail medical, and they're wanting treatment. They're begging for it. And we just haven't had the resources or the ability to really point them in the right direction. This program would get them started. Their AOD assessments would be paid for, their medical assessments would be paid for by the grant, and they would start medications while they're in custody. There would also be some treatment, pre-treatment in the jail, and our new behavioral health person would be giving those classes. There'd be a community referral once they're out of custody, and their medications and treatment would continue. I have some interesting stats. I talked to Winnebago County, and the last couple months they've spoken with 118 inmates. 94 of those had admitted to overdosing to the point of using Narcan or being hospitalized. That directly affects law enforcement. That directly affects Patty's department. It probably affects Lisa Plunkett's department. The number of folks that are involved in children's services, child protection cases, this really is far-reaching. Conversely, in Kenosha County, this program has been going since 2019, and they've served 238 folks, and 187 have not returned to jail. So it has a fairly successful rate of success, and I'm pretty excited about the possibility for St. Croix County and venturing into this program.
If I could just jump in and just welcome Kathy back to this committee. Kathy, for many years, was our chief deputy sheriff and appeared on behalf of the sheriff on numerous occasions and is well known to us. And it's a great addition to our staff to have Kathy and all of her knowledge in this area. So we really appreciate that. Thank you, Phil and Kathy. Was there any questions for Kathy or any other additions from Phil or Kathy? If not, Kathy did mention Narcan in the course of her discussion. At our meeting in September, we had all agreed that it would be nice to have a presentation on Narcan, but then as a result of not having our October meeting, we decided to bring in the entire county board, so the presentation we would have received, we already received at our county board meeting. So I just thought about that as we were going through this now. Hearing no other questions, we'll turn to the district attorney for his update.
This is, I talked about this at the committee of the whole meeting. This is somewhat of a preamble for the December meeting where I'll have a draft resolution that I'll be asking for this committee to adopt. But basically, the struggle in DA's offices around the state is finding people to take assistant DA jobs. And also that the state has not kept up with, in many counties, and St. Croix County included, with adding new positions. The only way new positions get added to a DA's office is by the legislature. Just as I think this is the most telling in that regard, is in 1989, prior to 1989, all assistant district attorneys and district attorneys were county employees, but the smaller counties were having trouble recruiting people, and given their smaller salaries or what those smaller counties could afford. So 1989, all prosecution positions in the state became state employees. And in 1989, when that happened, St. Croix County had 5 state prosecutors. And at the time I looked back at the census data, there's 23,000 people in the county. Now, at I think 96,000 people, we have 7 prosecutors. So the state legislature hasn't kept up with the growth. The pay is what makes it really hard to recruit. We currently have 2 open positions. One has been open for over 4 months. The other one has been open for over 6 months. Minnesota, and I was just looking at a study from 2011, and the median salary in Minnesota was over 100,000 for prosecutors, and for Wisconsin in 2011 it was 56. Right now the starting salary is 54,000 for an assistant DA, with over $100,000 in law school loans and 7 years of post-high school education. So that's why it's hard to find anybody to take these jobs. They're stressful jobs. You know, you're talking with parents of homicide victims. We're talking about talking to rape victims. We're going to trial on super complex emotional cases. Every prosecutor has hundreds of cases, so it's a lot to ask for a salary that doesn't even really allow someone to buy a house in the county. Recently there was a market-based study by the Wisconsin Division of Personnel Management, and that market-based study determined that to have a competitive salary, it should be $35 per hour starting salary, which is, I think, $72,000. So every district attorney in the state signed a letter requesting that the legislature adjust salaries up to that market-based amount and then give current ADAs pay increases commensurate with that starting salary. So basically, that's what the resolution is that I'm asking for this body to adopt, is asking the legislature to adopt that market-based salary recommendation. So in just the last 4 years, we've had 7 positions turned over for assistant DAs. And every single time we've asked for permission it's an exception. Normally you can only hire at the minimum, but we asked for exceptions to be able to hire somebody at a higher rate, and we've been the last 7 times denied that. So, which means we're only bringing in, unless we can find somebody to transfer in from somewhere else, we're bringing in brand new attorneys with no experience. So in the DA's office right now, we have 3 prosecutors that have more than a couple years experience. So those 3 prosecutors, which includes myself, are doing all the homicides, all the major felonies, and then we're also trying to constantly mentor the new attorneys we're bringing in as positions turn over. So right now we have 6 state prosecutors because we have 2 positions vacant. One's a temporary part-time COVID position that we've been unable to fill. And we have 5 rooms to cover. We have 4 courtrooms and the court commissioner's hearing room, so it's really hard to accommodate things like time off or sick time too, because if we have 2 people out, we don't have enough bodies in the office to even cover all the hearing rooms. So that's the struggle. I'll have the resolution. This resolution's been going around other counties also.
Questions for the district attorney? We did hear from him in our board meeting and heard from him now. We'll be taking up the issue more formally in December with specific language, and we'll get that to everybody ahead of time. Thank you, Carl. Next item on the agenda is a resolution to support the U.S. Constitution and the Second Amendment. I'm going to call on Supervisor Carlson to discuss that, but I will kind of apologize to the committee. We have the issue on the agenda, which is good, but it's an important issue. But we didn't have specific text in time to include in what we sent out in the agenda, and there are time limits when we can send out the agenda. So folks have not been able to review precisely what Supervisor Carlson is going to bring up, and I'll apologize for that. Supervisor Carlson.
Thank you. The reason why this was brought up is that when I ask people what their issues are, people are worried about their Second Amendment rights, especially not so much from the county level, but from above. So the reason for a resolution is to let the state and the federal level know that St. Croix County has a resolution that we support the Second Amendment. It also lets the people know that we support the Second Amendment. I was told this would be controversial. Possibly. To me, it is not, because we all made an oath to uphold the Constitution, and currently the Constitution, Second Amendment, says it shall not be infringed, and we keep seeing attempts at infringing on the rights. So that's the reason, just to simply state that we uphold our oath to support the federal and state Constitution and preserve the rights explicitly provided therein to the bearing of arms for lawful purposes and exposes actions contrary to the rights.
I wasn't sure if the supervisor was seeking recognition or not, the administrator. If not,
We have not seen the language. I don't have a copy of it. The crowd has a copy of it. I don't have a copy of it in front of me. I'm not comfortable discussing today. At best, tabling it is what I recommend.
Supervisor Carlson?
She's right. She should have a right to look at it. Nobody likes to be ambushed, so I would like to bring it up at the next committee meeting.
That's one resolution we could just agree on now. I think that we'll have the language and it can come up in December. Or there could be any other actions any supervisors would like to propose if we wanted to address it now or wait until December to address the issue. I'll simply add, as a general statement, I think Supervisor Carlson addressed it correctly. From what the language that I have seen that he is circulating now or is about to circulate, I think it's very thoughtful language. It addresses it the way he said. It is not over-the-top language in any way. However, I would add that as a county board, we have certain issues we can normally address that are within our ambit of jurisdiction. We can address certain things within this committee. And we've generally tried very hard to avoid, I'll just say, international or national issues that don't directly relate to the county. So I'm not commenting directly on what we might do in December, if that's the way we proceed, but I just throw that out as one of the principles we've generally operated as a county board. If I don't hear anything else, what I'll accept is the idea that we'll postpone this until December. We'll have a resolution will be circulated, and we'll have plenty of time to discuss it thoughtfully then, if that's okay, Supervisor Carlson. That's the way we'll act. Next item on the agenda is the sheriff.
Could I just clarify, this is the language that you want in the resolution next month then?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
I am going to give a brief update on a topic that's already been brought up a couple times today, mental health. I talk about this regularly at these meetings. I'm going to show you a couple incidences from within the jail. We talk about mental health, we talk about substance abuse, we talk about medical issues in the jail. We're coming into a new medical contract here very soon. Part of the ARPA funds, and we talked about, Chair Fiedler had brought up the ARPA funds being used to really assist us in the jail with a mental health, a county worker mental health. In the past, our previous medical contract, they provided mental health services. Somebody that came in about 30 hours a week. One of the drawbacks to that contract set up the way it was, opposed to how we're going to be doing it with a county worker, is if somebody has contact in the jail with the mental health worker and then they're released from jail, they still have that county contact. Under the current mental health contract in the jail, that information isn't shared to the health department. Or you know, if somebody goes up to the services center that had been receiving assistance in the jail, they go up to the services center and says, I was receiving, you know, speaking with somebody in the jail, mental health. You get up to the services center, they don't know what they're talking about because they don't have access to that information. This is going to assist us embedding a county worker in the mental health component in the jail. That ability, if somebody is released, that they can be seen outside and there's going to be that fluid information sharing. or vice versa. If somebody's seeking help in the county, outside of, they get brought into jail, that jail mental health is also going to have that access to the county information from the health center. So we're changing up our medical contract in the jail. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. We did a jail inspection tour earlier this year. Each one of you guys walked through the jail. You saw the new mental health special needs unit or wing that in 2020 we constructed. That houses 9. On October 31st, I'll just throw a couple of these out for you. And again, that special needs unit can house those in mental health crisis, those on special watches, medical, if there's a withdrawal that's taking place. That's what those 9 cells were for. On October 31st, all 9 cells were full. The 3 cells in receiving were full on 15-minute suicide watches. A person was just being brought in that had to be evaluated for suicidal ideations. One of our other blocks, we had 2 on 30-minute mental health watches. So that's 13 people. We had 106 average daily population for the month of October. First of the month we had 118, 31st we had 113. So on the 31st, over 10% were mental health or medical watches. And you see in the mental health area, special needs area, there was that fencing to the ceiling. Walk up the steps, and on the tier you had the fencing to the ceiling. So strangely enough, here's B block, and I want you to focus on B8. I'm going to show a video from August, September, I see. Early in the morning, inmates around. And the people that you're going to see, and obviously we're going to, the video will stop, but it's a disturbing look. Again, middle of the day. So, and then this picks up later. Did lose consciousness. Several inmates jumped in. If I would have kept playing the video, you'll see some that the gentleman that was at the table was seriously disgusted that somebody interrupted his time on his tablet and got up and walked away. Thank goodness a couple other inmates jumped in and helped. He was transported over to Regions. Minor medical brought back that day. Now we go to October 28th. Same block, different person. And the person that had done it the first time and this person, I don't believe were ever housed in the same unit together, and they're not there at the same time. So where this guy came up with his idea, also I don't know. See the deputies responding. They have their tasers out. He complies. But the reason I bring up these 2 incidents is it's that upper tier. The ability to, and there's always been that concern of an inmate jumping, one of us getting thrown over, suicide attempt by jumping over, which happened in Eau Claire. picks us up at the end, and then you can see our mental health person coming in. And the reason the block was locked down that day is when we have somebody comes in, that comes in the back that we're fighting with, coming in, he was in a psychosis, so we will lock down the pod because we don't have anybody down there to watch. So we lock him down so we can go and contain the other person. That guy didn't want to lock down, so now we've got two big disturbances going on at the same time, both with mental health. So those are some of the struggles and challenges. Again, kudos to the staff, kudos to a couple of the inmates that jumped in, that really helped us tremendously. So we are so that is what we intend to do in the upper tier, on all 4 blocks. So we're getting some bids on that. We have enough in the jail assessment fund to take care of that. And what that is every time there's a citation, you'll see a jail assessment fee, and it goes to the county. And that can only be used on projects of, in essence, bricks and mortar. Well, this is a project that falls into that. So that will be something that I hope to get going very soon, and getting that corrected. So I just wanted to brief you guys on that because I know there was a lot put into this area, a lot of funding, county board support, and it is being used. I wanted to share that it is being used. So any questions on that project that we have moving forward?
So it's clear that you have so many people that need to be isolated, and we don't have enough space for that. I mean, that's what I'm hearing too, right? Because when you're bringing them in, they're sometimes staying in the receiving cells, and that's not the intention of those long term.
Not the way they're set up now, no. As you remember, going through those receiving cells, there's not a shower in that cell. In these cells up here, they have a shower in there. They have TV in there. It's all self-contained in their cell. Those receiving cells, no. They have none of that. So if they are in crisis or psychosis and we have to try to get them a shower, which is the humane thing to do, we have to move them into a shower that is not controllable. So I don't know what the future looks like for more receiving cells. 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is down the road for expansion of the jail. We threw it on the KIP, looking out 5, 10 years, but I guess we're getting inundated right now and it's turning into a hospital. And it should not be a hospital. That's that mental health. It's not completely broken, but boy, is it fractured in this state.
Well, and that I think gets back to what we were trying to do with the Kitty Roads. Unfortunately, we didn't get the grant, but I think in that case it would have, I know you and other law enforcement spoke in favor of that idea, and I think that this is proof positive that we need to do something. I mean, and it's not easy to do, clearly.
Right. That would have been a small resource that we could have used. And the only other thing, kind of rolling into that, we had our drug take-back day last week. We do that twice a year. So 2 times a year, we run drugs down state patrol, or to the state, and they end up incinerating. This year, on this second trip of our year, we took down 642 pounds of unused or turned over medication. Those are all the drug drop boxes in all the PDs throughout the county, as well as the sheriff's office, and if there's other medications such as death scenes. So 642 pounds went down, so.
I was just going to ask you about the carport intake area. We have a remodeling plan for that. How would that play into some of this cell needs that you have?
So most of you remember, I hope, in the jail, Sallyport, where the squad cars come in. The vision would be, and the vision is kind of off of how Eau Claire had built their jail, receiving cells. The idea for a receiving cell is merely that, to receive an inmate and hold them there until court. If upon going to court, then they're held for bail or additional charges, whatever it might be, if after their first appearance they are then to stay, then they will go back down to the pod. The vision would be that we would add more receiving cells. Part of that, holding them in the receiving cells, would be, again, to eliminate potential contraband going into any of the blocks in the back, and really a better way to monitor somebody for at least a day to see what their mental health status is. Or if they are, because there's times where we don't have any room, and the guy that's the .25 goes down to the blocks and sits in the blocks. We don't have anywhere else to put him. The receiving cells would allow us to at least let people get into let us have a good view of their state of mind or their health, or if there's any other special precautions we need to take before putting them down with a whole lot of other people. Some of which may watch out for them, some of which don't care. As if the video would have played, you would have seen. So those additional receiving cells that we could push the jail out, push the Sallyport out, and in the current Sallyport, have receiving cells, reconfigure some things, and make those receiving cells a little more housing friendly. Again, the receiving cells we have now were built in the early 90s, having a TV that wasn't even pushed into there then. So I think that would benefit us greatly. That's how Eau Claire has it. They have 25 receiving cells, and that's how they do it. They come in, everybody into receiving, they go to court. If they're released, out the door they go. If they stay, they go back into the blocks. Monday we had 12 on intake that had to be brought up to the judges. So we have a lot. What did Judge Needham say he had in intake and out of custody? 50?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I thought he said he had 50 in court the other day, 12 in custody, and a whole lot that just had notice to appears.
Sheriff, during our tour, you explained some of that to us, made a good case for it. You've done it again, and Administrator Witt raised it. Maybe, I suspect there's a good deal of sympathy for the doing something in this area, and maybe I could just ask the administrator and yourself to maybe get together, and we can add that to our December item as well for a potential action item. It may also relate to the referendum, depending on what we come up with. It may relate to some things we're doing with the building, although I know the building is well along the lines of becoming finalized, but there's always a possibility. But if the administrator and the sheriff could talk this through over the coming month and come back with some additional options that maybe, if there are any action items for this committee, you could share with us. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, where I'd say we're at with that is, we've both discussed this. This is part of the bigger jail project that we've planned for a few years out, but it doesn't have to be part of the other project. It can be done independently, just this portion of it. It's no small project, though. It is a multi-million-dollar cost, and I don't know if we've actually split the dollar amount off of what just this piece would be, but you could do just this piece. So I just think that there's a potential there that we could maybe break up the jail project into other pieces. And I think it's several $1,000,000, but if the bigger county project comes through with really good numbers, and we end up with any dollars left or any of those unspent ARPA or KIP dollars that we've moved over, this might be one of those projects that we say, let's move this up in the time frame. So I don't know that next month we're ready for it, but I think maybe by March of next year, we may have a really good idea of where we are dollar-wise, and we'll seriously start talking about this.
That's satisfactory to me, if it's okay with the rest of the committee. Did you have anything else, Sheriff?
I did not.
Thank you for all you and your staff do downstairs. Sometimes it takes a couple of videos like that to, again, refresh us on what you face day to day in very difficult circumstances. Are there any other issues we care to take up during the business meeting? Comments on what the sheriff just said? If not, the business meeting portion is concluded. We'll go to the request for future agenda items. Obviously, we're going to have the referendum discussion resolution that Administrator Witt proposed that deals primarily with public safety with some HHS implications. We'll take up the resolution on the Constitution and the Second Amendment. And I would also suggest we, at that time, talk about future dates for meetings of this committee. Earlier when we first met, we talked about meet when we need to and don't meet when we don't have to. I'd mentioned before that, for example, the ADRC, when they do not meet in February and 1 month during the summer, let's just say July. When we meet in December, we might want to look at our calendars and see if we would also like to do something like that. We can always meet if something comes up that we have to meet on. But very tentatively, what the ADRC does, I've been on that council, and seems to work fairly well. And that would still leave us with approximately 10 meetings during the year. And I think we can do our business in that time. So we'll raise something formally along those lines in December, vote on it, so you all have an agenda, a schedule to look at for the coming year, 2023, if that's okay. Are there any future agenda items anybody else would like to raise? Administrator Witt.
Mandated services, I've asked the department heads to finalize their reports and provide those to Ms. Smith so that she can include those on future packets. So you'll be seeing those over the next couple of meetings,
and
whenever you meet.
Yeah, well, we had talked about that before, and we just had such a busy agenda this month and probably next month that even though I'm very interested in hearing those reports, I'd kind of encourage the administrator, if we could defer a month or two, I thought that would be just fine. Any other items we'd like to take up? If not, Janet, any correspondence announcements you have? If not, then we're adjourned at 9:33. Thank you.